Johnson, who is director of your sea turtle nest monitoring program. And so Sarah is going to tell us a little bit about sea turtles and a little bit about Share the Beach, and also maybe a little bit about how you can help, whether that is through getting involved with the volunteer organization or just things that you can take care to do while you were visiting the beach. With that, I'm going to let Sarah tell you a little bit about sea turtles.
Thank you. So I am, as Mendel said, I'm the director for Share Beach. We are a program as part of the Alabama Coastal Foundation. I have been the director for a little over 2 years now. This is my third season going into, but I've been with the program for over a decade. So I've been helping with the turtle nests along the Alabama coast for that long. We, as a program, monitor all 47 miles of Alabama's beachfront coastline. So that's the entirety of Dauphin Island here to the west of the territory, all the way to the Florida state line over in Baldwin County. Our volunteers get up bright and early every morning starting May 1st, and we patrol all the way through the end of August, and we cover the entirety of the beachfront looking for new crawls, which will indicate if turtle nested or if it just came up onto the beach at night, and continue monitoring through October depending on any nests that we have. Sea turtles will nest about every 2 weeks throughout the season, so one turtle can lay 4, 5, 6, 7 nests in a season, and we will monitor those through incubation, which is around 55 to 60 days dependent on temperatures and rainfall and things like that. So before I get further into what Share the Beach does, let me give you a little brief sea turtle information. So as far as sea turtle basics go, this is a preserved sea turtle. Sorry, we have a guest. This is a preserved hawksbill sea turtle. We don't get hawksbills here in the northern Gulf. They stick to the warmer Caribbean waters and nest down around those islands and down in Mexico. But these are where the term tortoise shell came from. They've got these beautiful, beautiful carapace or beautiful shells. And so this is where, these guys were hunted for their shells to make items out of. But general sea turtle anatomy is the same regardless of species. So the top shell is called the carapace, and each individual scale on it is called a scute, and that makes up the entire back portion of the turtle. You've got the head, which with its scales. Sea turtles have flippers, not feet. So if you ever see a turtle, even with webbed feet, if it has toes, it's an aquatic land turtle, and if it has flippers, it's a sea turtle. The underside of a sea turtle is called its plastron, and this is one solid, again, compared to the rest of their bodies, unlike most other turtles, where it's a little more proportional. Turtles is that their shells are very much a part of their body, cannot exit their shells like cartoons show any more than we can exit our skeleton. A sea turtle's shell is made up of its ribs. So I'm going to lift this one up because it's got a really good display here. So you can see this is the sea turtle's spine, and the back ribs come out to form the entire carapace. Just like if you were to look at the plaster on the front of that turtle, the front ribs would form that part of it. So sea turtles are very much a part of their shells, and they need them for survival. So if their shell gets damaged, they're at risk of infection, or they can even die from really severe injuries, just like if we were to sustain an injury. All right, we have a couple of other little skulls down here. This is also a loggerhead skull, just has not had the scales and other parts preserved on it. So this is just the skull. And then this little one is not a loggerhead. I don't know for certain, but it looks like it's probably from a Kemp's Ridley, which we do also get in these areas. Kemp's Ridleys are much smaller. They're usually around 100 to 150 pounds at most. So about this long total, whereas our loggerheads get 250 pounds. Kemp's Ridleys do typically nest during the day, so we're usually really fortunate to get to see those guys in action when they do nest here, but predominantly their nesting territory is over in the coast of Texas and Mexico, and that's where the vast majority of Kemp's Ridleys nest. So those are very rare for us. The other sea turtle that will very rarely nest here are green sea turtles. Their diet mostly consists of seagrasses, and since Mobile Bay has a lot of output, we have a lot of debris in the water. It's not very clear, so it's not good seagrass growing territory. So we don't have many green sea turtles, but we do occasionally get some, and we have had 2 green nests, or what we suspect are green nests this season so far over in Baldwin County. And we suspect that they are because while we didn't see the turtle, green sea turtles have a very different crawl pattern or track that they leave in the sand than our loggerheads or our Kim's Ridleys. So they leave very distinct markers for us. So we suspect we have 2 over there. We'll be really anxious when those hatch to see when they come out. You can identify those hatchlings as green or loggerhead. So a little bit more about Share the Beach.
Sarah, was there a leatherback?
There was, not in Alabama. Leatherbacks do not typically nest along the northern Gulf. If they do, it's very, very far east on the Florida Panhandle, but they are predominantly along the east coast of Florida and the South Florida beaches. But Pensacola was fortunate enough to have a leatherback nest over there earlier in the season, and so that's just a hop over from where we cover. They have not seen any other leatherback activity, and we haven't seen any either, so we're not sure if she, nested in that area and then went farther east again, back to kind of a normal territory for them, but it was very exciting to have one this close to us. They're very rare.
So, I know you were headed back to talking about Share the Beach, and I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about their kind of nesting behaviors. So one of the questions that we've been getting a lot of lately is about sargassum. So I was wondering if you could kind of wrap that in and explain the importance of sargassum to these sea turtles.
Yeah, let me cover a little bit about nesting and hatching, and then that'll tie in really well kind of to the tail end of that. So sea turtles nest normally at nighttime in the dark. So the adult will come up onto the beach. She'll dig a hole with her back flippers, lay all of her eggs, cover it back up, and then she flings sand all over the place to kind of camouflage where she has dug that hole, and then she'll crawl back out to the water. So when we go out on patrol in the morning, we're looking for those crawl marks and that really messed up area of sand. Once we find that, we do dig down to confirm that there are eggs there, so we know exactly where to mark, but we don't disturb them any farther. We don't take account of what's in there unless it needs to be moved, and those are very rare circumstances, like if it's way too close to the water, we may move a nest. But normally we'll just cover it up and leave it, and then we'll watch it. Sea turtle nests have what we call an upside down light bulb shape. And so this is a model that we have, and it's at the Alabama Aquarium, so you can come down and see it in person. But this would be the egg chamber that she has dug out with her back flippers. These can be as deep as 2 feet down from the surface of the sand. And she'll lay about 100, 120 ping pong sized eggs in the nest, and they are perfectly round, just like a ping pong ball. They don't look like a chicken egg or any other bird egg, and they do have a slightly leathery, soft shell because they are reptiles. And those are the kinds of shells that reptiles have. They will incubate in the sand for about 55 to 60 days, and then when they hatch, you'll have all these little hatchlings. They'll crawl up through the sand, so they'll start digging. We can listen with a stethoscope placed just under the sand, and we can hear all their scratching noises. Kind of gives us an idea of when they're going to emerge. We can also see the top level of the sand sort of start to cave in from all of their digging underneath, and it's pulling things down. So when they do emerge, they come out all at once. It's a big explosion usually of hatchlings that burst out and head straight for the water.
How many?
It can be up to 120, 130 at a time in a really good frenzy. Sometimes we'll have nests that we call tricklers, where we'll get 20 or 30 out, and then it'll be quiet for a little bit, and then we'll get another burst. But for the most part, they all want to come out at once, because when you're this big, there are safety in numbers, and so they do tend to wait and all come out together and make a big rush. They do fan out into a big wide V, so we give them plenty of room to get down the beach. And again, that's, you spread out, but you kind of stay close together, so you can't get picked off quite so easily. And then they hit the water. They will have just absorbed the last of their yolk sac right before they emerge from their eggs, so they've got a burst of energy. And that burst will last them a few days to both dig out of the nest, rush for the water, and then swim several miles offshore to the sargassum mats, which is floating seaweed, and get out there. That provides excellent camouflage for these baby turtles that are perfect little bite-sized morsels for like everything out there in the ocean. So they hide there. There are lots of other good food sources there for them, tiny little crustaceans and other small fish that they can eat and grow till they're not quite so susceptible. They will spend years out in those sargassum mats. So there have been times when we've had storms or strong winds push that in, and we have found what we call post-hatchling size turtles. So they're not brand new babies. They could be a year or 2 years post-hatching and have been living in the sargassum mats. And when a big storm or a really strong south wind blows that sargassum up onto the beach, like we've had a lot of this year, sometimes we will find sea turtles in it. We did actually 2 years ago have some hawksbills blow in. So, you know, that sargassum came from a good ways away to have those hawksbills in it. They were recovered and sent to a rehab facility. We do have 2 that we utilize here with our stranding network. One is over in Mississippi at the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies, and the other one is over in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, sorry, at the Gulfarium Care Center over there. And so we'll send rehabbed turtles or injured turtles there for rehab, and then they'll eventually come back here for release. So I believe one of those hawksbills did survive, and one of them was eventually released.
In the jar, there's one with an egg. I mean, a yolk sac still attached.
It's hard to see because of its other little friend. But
Come closer.
our sea turtles, this is the size of a hatchling, so they're very small. You know, just 4 inches or so long, and they are all curled up and they're in that egg. So their shells are still a little bit flexible, and they have their fingers all wrapped around, and this one does still have a sac because it did not emerge from its egg. It had not finished developing. It could have been that it was washed over too much by a storm that came through. Since sea turtles do need to breathe air, the eggs, as will sometimes happen with a quick high tide or a very brief storm, but if we get any, they may not survive. And so we'll be able to tell kind of the stage of development they were in when we do what we call a post-nest or a post-hatch assessment or a nest excavation.
Okay, we have a question. When you all watch the hatchlings emerge, do you try to protect them from predators on the beach?
That's a yes and a no kind of answer. We do try to interfere with the natural processes as little as possible. We don't want to alter the way the hatchlings behave. We make sure that we keep the beach extremely dark for them because on a normal beach setting there would be no lights around. So we're not shining flashlights and having any sort of external light source to guide them or to even watch for them. By virtue of us being present, it does prevent some predator interaction because they don't want to come near us being on the beach watching them. But we do on occasion see a ghost crab go after a hatchling. Those are predominantly what we see at night. Here on the island, we also have a very large fox population, and so we will see foxes go after hatchlings as well. But typically when we are around monitoring a hatching, we don't see much of that because those predators see us and don't want to come near us.
So you had mentioned that
part of it is just find all of that activity before the beach gets real busy in the morning, especially during and that's why we have that 9 a.m. cutoff.
So I just would like to point out that you guys are doing this under the permitting from federal agencies because
Yes.
they're protected species. So
sea turtles are
anyone who wants to get involved will have to go through the proper training and be included in the volunteer program and under the permits.
Correct, yes. And sea turtles are all listed as threatened and endangered. They are protected under the Endangered Species Act, which means you can't handle them without proper training. So our volunteers sign up in March, April at the beginning of the year, and then we have trainings, and we have to get all of that finished before the season starts May 1st. So we do all of that early. If you are interested in joining the program, that's the time to do it. We always post the information. Very, very beginning of March is typically when we'll post the final dates, and then end of March, beginning of April is when registration happens. So you can keep an eye on that info for details.
And so if folks, are just curious about how they may be able to help sea turtles in their vacations,
Yes.
What are the kinds of things that you ask folks to do?
So hopefully this is the easy thing to remember. Everyone can help out. And that's by keeping our beaches clean, dark, and flat. And so a clean beach, meaning you don't leave your beach gear out overnight. A lot of people like to do this because it's convenient. You don't have to lug it back and forth every day. But a sea turtle needs a nice, open, expansive beach. We have had 2 instances already this season of sea turtles running into beach items that have been left out, and they turn around and go back to the water without nesting. And this can be a problem if they do that too many times, because they will eventually drop their eggs in the water and then they're no longer viable. So we need to keep the beaches clean. We need to keep them dark, meaning we don't want artificial light on the beaches. We want people to limit their use of flashlights, outside lights on houses or condos or cars even pointing out toward the beach. We don't want white lights on the beach. We do encourage people to get a red flashlight if you do need some kind of light out on the beach. This is the Share the Beach flashlight. It's made by Maglite. I apologize, I grabbed the one that doesn't have our logo on it. This was our tester. But it does have our logo on it. It's a red light, and these red lights have been tested in a bunch of studies, and they don't disorient sea turtles as much as white light does. So they're very beneficial to have out there. And then the other one is flat. So we want a nice flat beach so sea turtles can get up and do what they need to do, very similar to removing your beach items. We want to fill in any holes so they won't fall in and get stuck, and we want to knock down sand castles as well so they don't run into those. One of our instances this year actually had a sand castle and beach furniture and a tent, so it was like everything all in one. There just wasn't a hole present, but everything else was there for, you know, all of the things that we suggest against doing. The final thing really that isn't part of the typical clean, dark, flat conversation is quiet, and that's mostly because it's usually quiet on the beach when nobody's out there. But if you are on the beach when a sea turtle comes up, you need to stay quiet. You need to stay low to the ground so you don't present this big kind of imposing silhouette to them. You need to keep your distance from them and stay quiet so it doesn't startle them back into the water, again, creating a false crawl. So we don't want to get up on them. I know it's an exciting experience. It's not the time to get video. It's not the time to take pictures. It's not the time to run up and get as close as you can. They are there to do what they need to do to survive, so we need to give them the space to do it. So clean, dark, flat, and quiet are what every vacationer can follow to help sea turtles in the area that they are visiting.
And you had mentioned that Kemps make a different kind of crawl pattern and loggerheads. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah.
And this is how you guys can get a pretty good idea of what kind of turtle has nested, what kind of turtle nest you found.
Kemps Ridleys and loggerheads are harder to tell the difference because they make a very similar pattern. We can sometimes guess if it's a Kemps Ridley because it will be a little bit smaller, but we certainly have smaller loggerheads as well. So that's not a definitive marker for us. We determine those at hatching when we can identify them by the actual turtle. But loggerheads and Kemps Ridleys have what we call an alternating crawl pattern, and so they will pull one flipper at a time and crawl through the sand like this and make very distinct kind of swirl patterns when they pull their flippers back. Green sea turtles are very distinct in that they have an even crawl pattern. They kind of do like a butterfly in the sand, if you are familiar with swimming strokes. They will pull with both flippers at once, and it creates a more flat, spread out flipper pattern that we can see, and a much more straight body line in the middle, so it doesn't have the same sort of swivel that a loggerhead or a Kemps Ridley would have. So that's how we're able to tell that those were green sea turtle tracks, which gets us very excited because we don't see those very much.
And then can you talk a little bit, can we talk just a little philosophically about why we go to so much effort? I mean, there are, as you mentioned, these animals are threatened or endangered depending on the species and where they are. But they are threatened and endangered because of human activities.
Correct. Yeah. And beachfront development is obviously what we are out working against. Share the Beach specifically operates on land, so specifically with nesting. And I myself hold the hotline, the sea turtle hotline for Alabama, so I also get calls about stranded or injured turtles as well on land. So beachfront development such as lights and human activity on the beach and all of kind of the things I mentioned with beach gear and furniture and lights and holes are all of the things that humans have done to make it harder for sea turtles to nest successfully. And if you can't nest and lay your babies successfully, that is obviously going to be a detriment to your species. But other activity out in the water has also contributed to that. Things like bycatch, where turtles are getting caught in fishing nets. Since they do need to breathe air, those nets drag typically for a lot longer than a sea turtle can hold its breath. So they will drown in those nets. Things like dredging activity, while most dredges have fail-safes in place for sea turtles, many fishing nets do too, but not all. And so we do see impacts from those. We see it from ghost nets or a fishing line that has been discarded, and ghost net meaning it's a fishing net that has been discarded and is in the water and can catch things that then can't escape from them. So it then gets trapped in it underwater and drowns. So a lot of things. We see a lot of balloons on the beach. Balloons in the water strings can wrap around sea turtles and other animals. They can also ingest them because they look a lot like jellyfish that they will eat. Other things like plastic bottles and other plastic items, when they get in the water, they take on different smells. So while this to us doesn't look or smell like food, to a lot of ocean life, it does. It'll take on these smells very quickly, and all of these diamond-shaped cuts in this are actually from a sea turtle biting it. So obviously if you're ingesting plastic, it's not leaving room for ingesting the food that you actually need to survive. So we do have sea turtles and other marine life that, that does die from basically starvation because they're filling up on plastics instead of actual food.
And you mentioned some of the like efforts to mitigate sea turtle death, the turtle excluder device on fishing nets, and then the dredge devices. But those were only put in place after sea turtles gained protection because their numbers had declined so much.
Yeah.
So historically, those things, there were a lot more casualties in sea turtle populations from those operations.
And they were also a delicacy for a long time, so people ate them. You know, and so frequently we are trying to repair what we have kind of damaged rather than trying to prevent. So moving forward, it's good to just sort of take the mantra of what we like to say on the beach, leave only footprints, or leave no trace in, you know, interior lands, is, you know, treat it like you left it. Don't let anything know that you've been there, and try to leave as little impact as possible so that we don't have to have these sort of long-term protections to scramble and make up for it later.
And then can you talk a little bit about the sea turtle life cycle, and, you know, how the life cycle affects their reproductive potential?
Yeah. Sea turtles are very long-lived, which means they take a long time to reach maturity. Hatchlings will spend many, many years at sea growing and maturing. The exact age is kind of different for all species, but we can see turtles hitting maturity as early as 20 to 25 years in certain species, usually the smaller ones, and some of the large ones like leatherbacks taking 40 to 50 years to reach sexual maturity and reproductive age. And so obviously when you have that long of a life cycle, and it takes a lot longer to give back to your species, the odds of survival are lower. Hatchlings, without any of the impacts that humans have created, have about a 1 in 1,000 chance of survival. So with all the human impacts that we've created, those odds are even lower. They do lay a lot of eggs in a season, and again, that's to make up for being so susceptible to predators when they're so small. But you know, we don't want to add to that mortality figure by creating it, difficult situations for the sea turtles. Once they have kind of grown to that point where they are reproducing, all of that happens offshore, the activity of it all, and then the female sea turtles will come back to roughly the same area where they hatched out. They have this really cool sort of homing in their navigational skills. Nobody quite knows how it works, but they will come back to within about 30 to 40 miles of the beach where they hatched out. So if they hatched out on Dauphin Island, they're not necessarily coming right back to Dauphin Island. They may go over to Baldwin County. They might just hop the state line and nest in Pensacola, but they will stay in the general area. So protecting these nests here and increasing the chances of survival for these sea turtles means more that will come back later to lay those nests in the future. Male sea turtles don't ever come back onto the beach unless they're injured.
So we have another question. Awesome. When turtles get to the water, what predators do they now have to watch for? So you mentioned some that were on the beach for the hatchlings, but once they reach the water?
Almost everything. Sea turtles, like you saw with the preserved hatchlings, are very, very small. Mahi and trigger and sharks. You've got seabirds, you've got seagulls, even more pelagic or out in the open water seabirds that will pick them off as they are kind of living among the sargassum. Basically, any of the beach monitors all 47 miles, or it has the dependent on your volunteer corps, right? It is.
So it's a lot of monitoring to be done. And so how much of that are you guys actively monitoring on a daily basis?
We cover most of it on a daily basis. Honestly, there are snafus, there are thunderstorms that pop up and we've got to scurry off the beach. There is, illness that happens when a volunteer wakes up in the morning and can't cover a section. But these instances are pretty low. We do actually keep track of areas that don't get covered day to day. So we kind of have a general mileage that we've covered each day. And the majority of it's patrolled on foot. The reason that we do this is to prevent noise, all of these things. So the majority is patrolled on foot, which again is hard. Not everyone wants to get up that early and then trudge a mile or two. Most of our patrols cover about a mile, so we break them up into manageable chunks. We have 3 sections that are typically patrolled by UTV, by beach vehicle, and that's the far west end of the island because that's way too far to do on foot, and has only the one access point at the West End Beach.
Yeah, you can't drive to the end of the island and then walk a mile.
And walk.
Yeah.
Nope, it's about 8.5 miles down and back, and so we just have to drive that. We do go slow, and we do stay very close to the high tide line so that we are not impacting nesting shorebirds or any of the other animals that might live up in the dune area. So we try to, again, keep our impact as low as possible. Our Fort Morgan section will also cover a chunk of it on UTV, again, because that chunk is, that section of beach is a little bit larger than some of our others. And then the Bon Secours Refuge will also use a vehicle on occasion to cover some of theirs.
So there have been times in the past where, do you know the history of Share the Beach? When did Share the Beach start?
It started officially in 2001 or 2002. I think that date kind of gets muddled a little bit. So it has been active for around 20 years, at least. I want to say it's probably 2001 because one of our turtle team leaders has been with it since the beginning, and I think she hit 20 years last year, which is just amazing. So for 20 years, we've been active on the beach, or roughly 20 years, which, if you think about it, efforts that began then with hatchlings would be seeing those hatchlings reach maturity now or in the next 5 or 10 years, which is really exciting to see how that is going to impact our numbers here in the near future, to see all of our efforts.
So I know that in years past, there have not been enough volunteers to cover the whole coastline, but that's great that you guys now have that many. How many volunteers do you have?
The program as a whole has around 450 volunteers. So it's a huge number. It sounds huge, but there are definitely times when you still struggle. We need to get patrols covered, guys, but it's so hard, to get everyone out on the beach. People have work schedules, people have kids and camps and summer vacations and things.
So maybe there's a team that covers a particular section of beach, and if, you might have a couple of individuals who do it one day, and you might have other folks who do it on different days.
Yeah, we do. So that's good to mention. The entirety of the 47 miles is not covered at random by all of the volunteers. It's split up into 9 groups. So we have the Dauphin Island team that covers all of Dauphin Island. We have the Bon Secours Refuge, which actually operates under their own permit since they are federal lands, but we still count their nest numbers in the Alabama totals. We work very closely with all of them. We're all doing the same thing. And they cover the refuge territory over there on Fort Morgan Peninsula. Our Fort Morgan team is our 3rd team. And then as we head east, we've got our Laguna Key team that operates in front of Little Lagoon, West Beach and East Beach teams in kind of the heart of Gulf Shores. We have our Gulf State Park team, which covers Gulf State Park. Orange Beach and Alabama Point is still within Orange Beach as a city, but it covers from Perdido Pass to the state line. So that's just that last little chunk. So we have 9 total sections. So we split our volunteers up on teams. They kind of choose the team that works for them as far as where they live, how far they want to drive.
So what else would you like folks to know about sea turtle? One of the other things that I like to point out about sea turtles, so you mentioned that they do return to their natal beaches,
yes,
like where they hatched, or close.
Yeah.
And we know that about them, but you also mentioned that we don't know why. We meaning, people who, just people as a body of knowledge in the scientific community. So I think it's interesting too that although we know a lot about sea turtles, and there's a lot of sea turtle research and rehabilitation and conservation efforts, there's still a lot that we don't know, and that's partly because of their really long lifespans. And if you think about the kind of the career of a researcher, it's hard to study a lifespan of a sea turtle.
When it's outliving you.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's also incredibly hard to track them from any early stage because you don't know the survival, and unfortunately tracking is still very expensive as far as tagging and things like that go. So spending all the money to tag a certain number of hatchlings or juveniles and then hoping that they survive is the tough part, to get any valuable data out of that, you know, because odds are you're going to lose the majority of your trackers to sea turtles that have died from very natural causes, predation and illness and everything.
So still a lot of questions about sea turtles. So for any young people who are considering careers in science and maybe interested in sea turtles, there's a lot left to be learned.
A lot to discover, yeah, for sure. Other ways that people can help are really just by financially supporting our program. We are a nonprofit. We really rely on donations and grants to keep ourselves running. We have the last month of our license plate campaign running right now. I do not have one with me, unfortunately, a little picture to show you guys, but it's a gorgeous plate with sea turtles on it, and it's in what I call the Kickstarter phase. So if you're familiar with Kickstarter, it's not made yet, but you're pledging to it. So you pay your money, you say, yes, I want to get it, and once you've reached your goal, it will be made. We are in the final month. We have until July 31st to meet that goal. All of the information for signing up for that is on the ACF website. It's www.joinacf.org, and the license plate link is right there at the front. So if you'd like to help us make that license plate a reality, you can go there, complete that pre-commitment form. It does require like all of your car VIN number and information like that, but you don't have to wait for your normal tag renewal time. Since it's just a pre-pledge, it's not tied to anything at the moment. If it does get made, you would then renew it every year at your normal time, but right now you can do it at any time. So if you've already renewed, if you're not due yet, still go on and help us meet the goal to get that done. That'll fund a huge chunk of our work. We would get 82% of the proceeds from that plate, and if you're not familiar, specialty plates in Alabama are usually $50 in addition to your normal registration fees, and we get 82% of that. It's like 40 something and change that we get from every single plate. So that goes a long way in buying stakes and tape and gas for the UTVs and maintenance and t-shirts and just the normal stuff, you know, getting to go out and do education events like this and have supplies for it. So other ways, if you're not interested in that tag, would be adopting a nest.
Do you know how many pledges you need?
To get kind of the more basic level, we need like another 70 or so. And then if we've suddenly got some crazy giant surge, then we might get the full color plate. But right now it's looking like the more basic one is the one that's going to happen, but about another 70 or so. We just made a new post on our Facebook page yesterday, so you can go and share that or find the more information about it. You can see the tag on that post.
Would that be Share the Beach or it's Alabama Coastal Foundation?
Share the Beach, Alabama's Sea Turtle Conservation Program is the full name, but all of the information's on Alabama Coastal Foundation as well, so you can go to either place, find all of it. Our Adopt a Nest program is also still going on. We're still finding so many nests every day, and you can go on and pledge to support a nest. You will get updates on that nest after it hatches. We don't share information before hatching, both for the safety of our volunteers and our hatchlings. But you can say that you fostered that nest, and you'll get an update when it's finished, how many hatched out of it and what its success rate was and all of that good stuff. So those are both two really great ways that people can help support our program.
How many nests have you found this season?
We have 41 so far as of this morning. Yeah, we're doing very well. That number sounds really small when you follow other programs in Florida that have literally thousands in a season. But Florida is the sea turtle nesting haven of the country. They see, you know, over 90% of the nests in the entirety of the United
Well, and they have
States.
a lot more coastline.
They have a lot more coastline, yes. But 41 so far, and July and August are still very active nesting seasons for us, so we expect to see a lot more.
How does that compare to seasons in the past?
It's pretty low compared to previous seasons. Last season was extremely low, and we are still trending ahead of last season, but we're still behind previous seasons. And again, it's kind of this normal fluctuation in sea turtle reproduction. The same sea turtle would typically nest every 2 to 3 years. So they have high years and low years. You know, and even some that have aged out of having any more or just are reaching maturity. So we always have fluctuations. So it's always interesting to see. But honestly, at this point in the season, I couldn't even say where we're going to end up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's amazing. Is there anything that you'd kind of like to leave folks with as kind of a big picture message?
No, I mean, we've covered absolutely everything, so short of me rambling on through half of it again, the biggest thing is write down our hotline number. It's 866 Sea Turtle. So if you happen to find an injured, deceased, or a nesting turtle, again, remember, keep your distance, call the hotline number, it'll come to me, and we will make sure that that nest is protected or that sea turtle that needs help is recovered.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Mendel.